Hi, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Malice in the Mitten. I am your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Trace. It's good to hear you again. There was a bit there where we couldn't even talk.
I know laryngitis is a real thing.
Yeah, I've never had it that bad. I usually just get the froggy voice, but I've never completely lost my voice. But you were damn near there, huh?
Yeah, I was only able to whisper at one point, and then I thought, I'm going to try to scream, and nothing came out. It was just air. So anyway, everyone, so that's why we didn't record for the last week. I had to rest my vocal cords. I still don't sound 100% like myself, but we are good to go. So thank you. Sorry we had to miss a week, but I had to do what we had to do so that we could keep doing the show.
Well, it's good to finally have you back, and let's just get back into it. So what malicious stuff are you going to be telling me about tonight, Trace? Where are we going?
Well, I'm going to tell you about a precursor to the Mafia. Now, before organized crime had a name, before the Mafia became a household word, there was something else, something quieter, something more personal, a letter marked with a symbol, a hand dipped in black ink.
Oh, no. I feel like I already know where this is going.
I bet you do. And if you received one of those letters, it meant one thing. You had been chosen.
Chosen? Chosen for what?
To pay or to suffer. Now, before we step into tonight's story, I want to take a moment to give credit where it's due. This episode was inspired by conversation, and this one started with a simple question from our friend Angela Hafler, and that was, what do you know about the Black Hand in Michigan? Turns out, a lot more than I expected. So Angela, thank you for today's story.
I love that it came from Angela. And wow, this is a good topic to be bringing up.
Yeah, so I think it's time. Let's dive in. This is Season 11, Episode 9, The Black Hand, Michigan's original shadow.
Okay, before we get started, content warning. This episode includes discussions of organized crime, extortion, violence, threats, and historical accounts of bombings and intimidation tactics. Listener discretion is advised.
Now we're stepping into a chapter of Michigan history that most people have never heard of. But once you do, you'll never forget it. Now, because many Black Hand cases were underreported or simply lost to time, some of the stories in this episode are reconstructed from historical patterns, documented incidents, and known tactics used during that era. Before there was the Mafia as we know it, there was something far less organized and far more unpredictable: the Black Hand. Not a single organization, not a structured crime family, but a method, a tactic, a shadow network of criminals, often operating independently, who used fear as their primary weapon. So, what made the Black Hand different? Well, there was no central leadership, no formal hierarchy, no loyalty, only opportunity, and most importantly, no rules.
Okay, So it's very unlike the Mafia, by the way. This wasn't like the Mafia with families and structure and rules. There's always rules, and there's always somebody in charge of other bodies. Always.
That's right? You have the hierarchy, you have the boss, and you have, I don't know, all those things. I mean, you're from New York. What are all of these little titles?
Yeah, you gotta have the Don. But anyway, listen, this, I don't know, like, you're confusing me. It's like unorganized crime. This was before organized crime, so it was unorganized crime. But they liken themselves to a symbol?
Right.
Well, alrighty then. Okay.
All right. So this was absolute chaos. Now, anyone could be the Black Hand. And it almost always started the same way, with a letter, sometimes handwritten, sometimes crude, often marked with symbols. So the Black Hand, or a skull, a dagger, or a coffin. Inside the message, well, a demand for money and a threat. To understand why the Black Hand thrived, you have to understand who they targeted, primarily Italian immigrants. Why them? Because they were vulnerable. Many didn't speak English. Many distrusted police. Many came from regions where corruption was normal, and many feared retaliation against family members.
Okay, so the Italians, basically what you're about to tell me is that the Black Hand of Michigan, aka the unorganized crime, pissed off the Italians so bad that they organized against them and then made us all reap the horror for years. Is that what you're about to tell me?
No. I think they learned a lesson. Like, hey, we got to do this a better way.
Okay, so they took people that were living in fear, and what did they do?
Well, the Black Hand weaponized that fear. Michigan was booming with factories and railroads and industry, especially in cities like Detroit, Grand Rapids, Saginaw, and Flint. These cities were growing rapidly, and with that growth came opportunity. Now, I already mentioned that targeted people would receive a letter. So before we go any further, I'm going to break down the process into 5 parts. The first one is the letter writer, the mind behind the threat. Often semi-literate, broken English in letters, sometimes more educated than they appeared. They knew the victim personally or by reputation, and it was calculated risk versus reward. Now, the person writing the letter wasn't always a stranger. Sometimes it was someone who knew exactly who you were and what you had to lose. Then you have the enforcer, the one who made the threat real. They planted bombs, which were often crude dynamite devices. They set fires and carried out intimidation.
So the writer and the attacker weren't always the same person.
Correct.
Okay.
Which made it even harder to track. Then you have the watcher, the quiet observer. Now, they either lived in or near the same neighborhood as the people that they delivered the letter to. They would watch their routines and identified vulnerable targets like children or spouses. And sometimes the person watching you was someone you passed every single day and never even noticed them. Then you have the collector, the one who picked up the money. They were often different from the writer or the enforcer. They used drop locations, sometimes children, or intermediaries were used. And lastly, the connector, who was the spreader of information. They shared which families paid, passed along safe targets, helped create that cycle of repeat victimization. The Black Hand wasn't one person, it was roles. There was the one who wrote the letter, the one who carried out the threat, the one who watched, and the one who collected. And sometimes they weren't strangers to the victim at all.
Which I think makes it so much worse.
Yeah, it does. Because it means the danger was already inside the community. In some cases, the person delivering the message was not a hardened criminal. It was usually a child who would carry the notes or collect payments, because who would suspect them?
Yeah, and that's disturbing. But by the way, I totes would suspect them.
I know you would.
Back in those days, those newspaper boys, they were thirsty.
Yeah, you better watch all of them.
Yeah.
Now, if someone ignored their letter, the next step wasn't another warning. It was an escalation. Now, some of the common retaliation tactics were bombings, as I've already mentioned, arson, kidnapping, assault, and murder. And sometimes the violence came without warning.
So even if you paid, you weren't safe. It was like you had to play the game and kowtow the whole time.
Exactly. There were absolutely no guarantees. Some victims paid and were targeted again, because once you paid, you proved you were afraid. So now we're going to go back to what happened in Detroit in 1909. The city was growing fast in Detroit. Factories were booming, neighborhoods were expanding, and along certain streets, small immigrant-owned shops were beginning to thrive. One of those shops belonged to a man named Antonio Rinaldi. Now, Antonio was not wealthy. He was a grocer, a husband, a father of 3. He worked long days, kept his head down, and like many others, he believed that if he worked hard enough, America would take care of him.
Yeah, because that's what, quote unquote, we sell as the American dream, right? Just build something up and provide for your family, and you're supposed to be safe, happy, wealthy, and healthy.
That was the dream. Now, one morning, before opening his shop, Antonio found something waiting for him. It was slipped under the door. It was a letter. Inside, a crude drawing, a hand, blackened, and beneath it, broken English. You pay $200 or your family will suffer.
Well, that's crude, but direct and to the point.
It absolutely was. Now, $200 in 1909 would be a little over $7,000 today. That wasn't just money, that was survival. But Antonio didn't go to the police because he had heard the stories. People who talked, people who resisted, sometimes didn't get a second chance. So he waited, hoping maybe it wasn't real. 3 nights later, the windows of his shop exploded. Glass shattered into the street. Shelves collapsed. Food scattered. And in the smoke, another message.
So they didn't wait very long at all.
No, the Black Hand didn't wait. Records suggest Antonio eventually paid. Quietly. No report. No arrest. And no guarantee it would stop. And that's the thing about the Black Hand. You didn't win. You survived. Now, unlike modern crime cases, many Black Hand incidents were never fully documented, but records and whispers remain. Detroit saw multiple extortion attempts targeting shop owners, grocers, laborers, small business families. Letters demanding anywhere from $50 to $500. But Detroit wasn't the only booming city dealing with this. It was also happening in Saginaw and Flint, where similar patterns emerged. Threat letters, suspicious fires, explosions near homes or businesses. And far too often, there were no arrests. And if you are wondering why, well, simply because victims stayed silent.
And they were too scared to report it. And even if they reported it, what the hell would they report? I got a letter?
Someone drew up a weird black hand. What?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is driving me crazy. But go ahead.
Okay. And sometimes they didn't believe anyone would help them anyway. Across the country, investigators were beginning to take this seriously. Now next, we have Saginaw, Michigan in 1912. A quieter city than Detroit, yes, but not untouched. Here, the target wasn't a business. It was a home. The Moretti family had only been in Michigan for a few years at this point. This was a working-class family, tight-knit, trying to build something new. And then the letter came. This one was more aggressive. There were no symbols this time, just words. Pay, or your house will burn.
This was just an arbitrary shakedown.
Yes, no symbols, and that almost made it worse. The family didn't pay, not because they were brave, but because they couldn't. It happened in the early morning hours. An explosion. Neighbors reported a blast so strong it shook the nearby homes. The front of the house was destroyed, windows blown out, walls damaged. Their children were inside.
Oh my God. So they blew up the house when the kids were inside? Did the kids live?
Yes, miraculously. No one was killed. But the message was clear. This wasn't random. This was punishment. Authorities suspected Black Hand involvement, but like many other cases, no one was ever definitively charged. Because again, there were no witnesses, no cooperation. This was a community living in fear. Now imagine laying in your bed, knowing someone warned you, and then they followed through.
That's not just criminal. That's terrorism.
Yeah, it is. As I mentioned earlier, many Black Hand cases were underreported and poorly documented. By 1910, Detroit police could no longer ignore what was happening. This wasn't a series of isolated threats anymore. It was a pattern. Letters, demands, explosions. And then, one case changed everything. A successful Italian-American businessman, Antonio "Tony" Lombardi. Unlike others, Tony wasn't struggling. He owned multiple properties. He ran a successful import business, and in his neighborhood, he was known.
He would have been a prime target, a successful Italian man.
Exactly. Visible, successful, and vulnerable. His message came like so many others. But this one, more polished, more deliberate. It demanded $500, a massive sum at the time. $500 in 1910, that's the equivalent of roughly $16,000 today. Antonio's letter also included a warning. If you do not pay, your business will be destroyed. But Antonio did something different. He went to the police.
Well, that didn't happen often, right? That's a step in the right direction. But I'm already thinking that if he's a successful Italian businessman, he's already got ties to his familia in Italy. And the Mafia actually existed in like 1860 in Sicily. I'm thinking maybe he had some connections. Are you going to tell me he brought them over?
No, but what you're saying does make sense. Because agreed, the Mafia that's where it was born, I guess, right?
Yeah, it was born over in Sicily back in the it says 19th centuries, so which is like 1850, 1860s. So they existed. They already had their organized crime family happening over in Europe. And as people came over to America, I'm thinking the successful ones, like this guy, they probably had a couple of connections. All it takes is a week or two for them to come over here at that time, right? By boat?
I think so.
So he went to the cops to buy some time, and I'm curious to find out what happens with this one.
Okay. All right, now him going to the police set something in motion. Now across the country, investigators were beginning to take this seriously. One of the most well-known was Detective Giuseppe Joe Petrosino, an Italian-born officer who dedicated his career to tracking Black Hand activity and paid for it with his life. He was an NYPD detective with the Italian squad. His work exposed a nationwide pattern. Now, Petrosino wasn't just working cases in New York. He was trying to cut the Black Hand off at the source. His mission? Travel to Italy, gather criminal records, identify known offenders, and help deport criminals operating in the U.S. back to Italy.
So basically, he was going to the root of the problem over in Italy.
Yeah, he was. And that made him very dangerous. Now, his trip to Italy was supposed to be secret, but it leaked. Whether through corruption, loose talk, or deliberate betrayal, people in Sicily knew he was coming, and they were ready for him. On March 12, 1909, Petrosino was in the Piazza Marina in Palermo. He was alone when a man approached him and shot him multiple times at close range. He died right there in the square, far away from home.
Oh, well, that's heartbreaking. He didn't even get a chance to fight back.
Nope. Now, this wasn't a confrontation. It was an execution, and it sent a message that the people behind this kind of crime were organized enough and bold enough to eliminate anyone who stood in their way. Now, meanwhile, back in Detroit, the police, already overwhelmed, saw an opportunity. Now, instead of telling Antonio to stay quiet, they told him to play along. A drop was arranged, money prepared, officers positioned, watching, and waiting. But before the exchange could even happen, the Black Hand struck first. An explosion ripped through Lombardi's storefront. Glass blown outward, wood splintered, smoke pouring into the street.
So they didn't even wait for the drop. Did they not think it was going to happen?
No, this was a message. But this time, something went wrong. This time, there were witnesses. Now, people in the street reported seeing a man fleeing the scene. Now, their descriptions were vague, but vague as they were enough. And from those descriptions, the police were able to detain a suspect, a man believed to be connected to multiple extortion attempts. His name? Well, that was never widely published. But what mattered wasn't just the arrest. It was what it represented. For the first time, authorities had a cooperating victim, a coordinated response, and a suspect tied to the pattern.
Okay, well, this is, I guess, where things start to turn around.
Exactly. But slowly, this is the crack in the wall. But even then, convictions were difficult because evidence was so thin. Witnesses were afraid, and many cases still slipped through the cracks. But this case did something the others didn't. It proved the Black Hand wasn't invisible. It could be challenged, tracked, and eventually dismantled.
I'm sure not without a fight, though.
Not without a fight. Now, as time went on, something changed. Chaos became structure. Out of the disorder of the Black Hand, more organized groups began to emerge. Enter the Mafia, bootlegging syndicates, Prohibition-era crime networks.
So the Black Hand in Michigan was the beginning of all this.
Yes, it was. It was the prototype. And unlike the Mafia, the Black Hand wasn't a syndicate. And all the syndicate really means, I had to look that up because I wasn't certain. It just means organized. Like you mentioned, you have the Don and you have the, all the bosses and whatever all their titles are. It wasn't one organized group. It was a method used by different individuals and small groups, which made it far more unpredictable.
Yeah, because you can't predict anything where you don't have one boss and one group of people to point at.
Right. And that's exactly what made it so dangerous. The Black Hand didn't disappear overnight. It faded, evolved, absorbed into something bigger. But its impact remains. It normalized extortion. It built fear-based crime models. It laid groundwork for organized crime in America. And in Michigan, it left behind something quieter. A legacy of silence. Stories that were never reported. Families that never spoke. Crimes that were never solved.
Yeah, that's the scary bit right there.
It really is.
You don't know how many of these actually happen. You just probably know a handful in a huge vat of them.
You're right. Because how many stories were never told? There's something else about the Black Hand. Something you don't hear talked about very often. It wasn't just the letters. It wasn't just the bombs. It was what came after. Because in many cases, when families were targeted, they didn't just pay once, they paid again and again and again.
Wait a minute, why? I don't understand why these people just didn't get mad enough to be like, screw it all, I'm coming after you. Like, I totally feel like, I don't know. I guess I'm just wired differently. I'm way too easily unhinged. I would never would I ever be able to deal with any of that. I don't know.
Exactly. I know, it's like, ping. It's like, okay, we're flipping the script. I'm coming after you. That's how I think I would feel.
Yeah. I don't know.
Once you paid, you were marked. The Black Hand didn't always move on to a new victim. Sometimes they stayed. A family who became known as a safe house for extortion. Not safe in the way we think of it, but safe for the criminals. Word spread quietly between offenders. This house pays This business won't go to the police. This family is afraid. And so instead of one letter, they might receive many, and from different people.
So it just never ended. It just kept going and going and going.
Yeah. And that's the part that gets lost. Because imagine doing everything you were told, giving up money you didn't have, protecting your family the only way you knew how, and realizing you didn't stop the danger, you invited more of it. The Black Hand didn't just create fear, it created cycles of fear. And how many families carried that burden in silence, we may never know. Many victims didn't just fear the criminals, they feared being seen as betraying their own community. So before the headlines, before the pattern of intimidation, before crime had structure, there was fear, delivered in an envelope, marked by a hand that promised violence and often delivered it. The Black Hand may not have had a name that lasted, but its shadow still lingers. And here in Michigan, that shadow was very real. What we know is only part of the story. What we don't know may be far greater.
And really, it still is. I mean, there are still people out there shaking people down every day in ways that we don't realize and we probably never will realize. But all I have to say is I am now, at this very moment, realizing maybe this is why we are so hot-tempered as later generations. Because, I mean, at least as a kid growing up in New York, that was the first thing I learned, is when somebody tries to pick on you, you immediately attack. Because you don't ever want to be looked at as the weak one.
Right.
You don't ever want to give them an opportunity to keep up the threats and the bullying. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're weak.
And these people, these nice, kind, gentle people that got afraid instead of getting mad, they were the reasons why now, a few generations later, we're like, excuse me, no sir, I will bomb everything you own.
Don't you dare Black Hand me. I'll Black Hand you.
I will stay up at night watching the outside of my storefront, and when I see you, I will kill you. Kill you dead.
I'm going to kill you so dead.
That's how it would go today.
Exactly.
Send me a letter. Send me a letter.
It'll be the last thing you ever do.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I know. I love it. I can just see your eyes changing color, like glowing. You're so mad.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But the reason why is because a few generations ago, apparently our ancestors used to live in fear. So nowadays, we stay wishing a bitch would.
That's right. That is right. Now, this has been Malice and the Mitten, where we tell Michigan's darkest stories with care and without turning away from the truth. So thank you, everyone, for listening. It means so much to us. Please subscribe, comment, share, and leave us a 5-star review. This will help our show continue to grow. So thank you, everyone, and we will see you all back on Wednesday for Round Robin.
Bye.
Bye.